Jake Harrison stood in the airlock of the human transport ship as it docked with Nexus Prime. The massive station stretched out in all directions, bigger than any city he had ever seen. Lights flickered along its curved surface like stars, and ships from dozens of different worlds moved in perfect patterns around its docking bays. "First time seeing the Council Station?" asked Dr. Lisa Morgan as she joined him at the window. Her voice was calm, but Jake could hear the excitement underneath. They had both dreamed of this moment for years. "Yeah," Jake replied. "Hard to believe. We're really here." Behind them, Commander Rick Stone checked his equipment one last time. He was the military advisor for their mission, a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes. "Remember, we're representing all of humanity today. Every word matters," Jake nodded. As the captain chosen to lead Earth's first diplomatic mission, he felt the weight of 4 billion people on his shoulders. The three of them had trained for 2 years for this day. Earth had been trying to contact the Galactic Council for decades, ever since they first detected alien signals from deep space. Now, finally, they had been invited to present their case for membership. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. A creature waited for them on the other side, unlike anything they had seen before. It looked like it was made of living crystal, with light flowing through its transparent body in patterns that seemed to dance. When it spoke, the voice came from speakers built into the walls. "Welcome to Nexus Prime. I am Guide Zirin of the Zephyrian people. I will escort you to the Council chambers." They followed the crystal being through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were covered with symbols and writings from countless worlds. Other aliens moved past them, some floating, some walking on more legs than seemed possible, some that looked like clouds of gas held together by force fields. "There are 17 species on the Council," Dr. Morgan whispered to Jake as they walked. "Each one has been part of galactic civilization for at least 1,000 years. "And they've been at peace all this time?" Jake asked. "That's what makes the Council so powerful," Rick Stone added quietly. "They've figured out how to make different species work together." They entered an elevator that moved sideways as much as up, carrying them through the heart of the station. Through the transparent walls, Jake could see the inner workings of Nexus Prime. Massive computers processed information from across the galaxy. Energy flowed through conduits as thick as subway tunnels. Gardens grew in chambers where different atmospheric conditions were maintained for different species. "The Council has created something amazing here," Lisa said, her eyes wide as she watched it all. The elevator stopped at the Council chambers. The doors opened to reveal a room so large that Jake couldn't see the far wall. 17 platforms were arranged in a circle, each one designed for a different type of alien life. Some held creatures that stood on solid ground. Others were filled with water or different types of gas. In the center was a smaller platform where the humans would make their presentation. Guide Ziran led them to the center platform. "Wait here. The Council will convene shortly." Jake looked around at the empty platforms. Soon, representatives from 17 different worlds would judge whether humanity was ready to join galactic civilization. The thought made his mouth dry. By one, the Council members appeared. The Zephyrians materialized like crystalline statues that caught and reflected light in impossible ways. The Nephili flowed onto their platform like intelligent fog, constantly shifting and changing shape. The Cricks arrived in a group, insect-like creatures with 4 arms and compound eyes that seemed to look in all directions at once. Each species was stranger than the last. There were beings that looked like living plants, others that seemed to be made of pure energy, and some that Jake couldn't even figure out how to describe. All of them were ancient, advanced, and clearly far beyond anything humanity had achieved. A voice filled the chamber, coming from everywhere at once. The Council of 17 recognizes the delegation from the world called Earth. You may present your case for membership." Jake stepped forward. His heart was beating fast, but his voice stayed steady. "Honored council members, I am Captain Jake Harrison. With me are Dr. Lisa Morgan and Commander Rick Stone. We come representing the people of Earth, asking to join the galactic community." He activated the hologram projector they had brought. Images of Earth appeared in the air above them, showing cities, oceans, mountains, and millions of human faces looking up at the stars. "Humanity has achieved much in a short time," Jake continued. "We have split the atom, landed on our moon, and sent probes to the edge of our solar system. We have created art, music, and literature that expresses the hopes and dreams of our species." Dr. Morgan stepped forward when Jake nodded to her. "Our scientists have made discoveries in mathematics, physics, and biology. We have developed medical techniques that have eliminated diseases and extended human life. Our telescopes have mapped distant galaxies and discovered planets around other stars." The council members listened without interruption. Some took notes using methods Jake couldn't understand. Others seemed to communicate with each other in ways that involved flashing lights or changing colors. Commander Stone spoke next. "Humanity has also learned hard lessons about war and peace. We have fought terrible conflicts, but we have also learned to work together. The United Earth Government represents all nations and peoples on our world. We have maintained peace for over 50 years." Jake took over again. "We know we are young compared to your civilizations. We know we have made mistakes, but we have also shown that we can learn, adapt, and grow. We offer our unique perspective, our creativity, and our determination to help build a better galaxy for all species." The presentation continued for an hour. They showed examples of human music and art. They demonstrated mathematical proofs that humans had discovered independently. They explained human philosophy and ethics, and how they had learned to resolve conflicts peacefully. When they finished, the chamber fell silent. The council members began to communicate with each other in their various ways. Lights flashed between the Zephyrian platforms. The Nephili swirled in complex patterns. The cricks made clicking sounds that formed a rapid rhythm. Jake, Lisa, and Rick waited in the center of the chamber. The discussion went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, the voices stopped and the lights stopped. Flashing, a new voice spoke, deeper and more formal than before. "The delegation from Earth will now hear the judgment of the Council." One of the Zephyrian platforms moved closer to the center. The crystal being on it was larger than Guide Ziran, with more complex patterns of light flowing through its body. "I am Counselor Vextar, speaker for this session," the being said. "The Council has considered your presentation and debated your request for membership." Jake held his breath. "The species known as humanity shows promise in some areas," Vextar continued. "Your technological advancement has been rapid. Your art forms show creativity. Your mathematical discoveries demonstrate intelligence." Jake felt a spark of hope. "However," Vextar said, and that one word crushed Jake's rising excitement. "The Council finds that humanity is not ready for membership in galactic civilization." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Lisa gasped beside him. Rick's face went hard and angry. "Your species is too young," Vextar explained. "You have existed as a technological civilization for less than 200 years. Your history shows a pattern of violence and conflict that concerns the Council. Your emotional responses are too unpredictable and primitive for the responsibilities of galactic citizenship." "But we've shown that we can change," Jake protested. "We've learned from our mistakes." "Perhaps," Vextar replied, "but the Council cannot risk the stability that has been maintained for over 1,000 years." Humanity is classified as a developing species. You are restricted to your home system for the next 500 years. During this time, you may continue to develop and mature. When that time has passed, you may apply for membership again. The judgment was final. There would be no debate, no appeal, no second chance. The council had spoken with one voice, and that voice said humanity was not good enough. Jake felt anger and shame burning in his chest. They had come so far, worked so hard, hoped so much, and it had all been for nothing. The session is concluded, Vextar announced. Guide Xeron will escort you back to your ship. The crystal being appeared beside them again. Please follow me, it said, its voice apologetic but firm. They walked back through the corridors of Nexus Prime in silence. The wonders Jake had admired, on the way in now, seemed like reminders of everything humanity couldn't have. The other aliens they passed didn't look at them. To the galactic community, humans were just another primitive species that hadn't made the cut. At their ship, Guide Xerain stopped. For what it is worth, the being said quietly, I thought your presentation showed great promise. Perhaps in time, the council will see what I saw today. 500 years, Rick said bitterly. By then, everyone alive today will be dust. Time moves differently for different species, Guide Xeran replied. Do not lose hope. 25 years had passed since the council's rejection, and Earth looked nothing like the world Jake Harrison had left behind. Standing on the observation deck of Luna Station, the former captain watched ships move between the orbital shipyards like busy ants. The gray-haired man now wore the uniform of an admiral, but his eyes still held the fire that had burned since that terrible day at Nexus Prime. Hard to believe we built all this in just 25 years, said Dr. Lisa Morgan, joining him at the viewing window. Her hair was streaked with silver now, but her mind remained as sharp as ever. As director of the Earth Science Consortium, she had overseen the greatest period of scientific advancement in human history. The council did us a favor, Jake replied, watching a massive new ship take shape in the nearest shipyard. They forced us to stop looking for help and start helping ourselves. The ship they were watching was the U.S. Liberty, the largest vessel humanity had ever built. At 2 kilometers long, it dwarfed anything from the old Earth fleets. But size wasn't what made it special. The Liberty represented everything humans had learned during their years of isolation. Lisa smiled as she remembered the early days after. The rejection. Do you remember how angry everyone was? The protests, the demands to try again with the council? I remember President Walsh's speech, Jake said. She told us we had 2 choices. We could spend the next 500 years feeling sorry for ourselves, or we could spend them becoming the kind of species the galaxy couldn't ignore. The choice had been easy. Humanity had chosen to grow. The transformation began in the research laboratories scattered across Earth and its colonies. Cut off from galactic knowledge networks, human scientists had been forced to solve problems the hard way. Dr. Alex Turner's team at the New Geneva Physics Institute had made the first breakthrough when they cracked the secrets of quantum folding. Instead of copying alien technology, they had developed their own version that was completely different but just as effective. Alex is still working on those dimensional equations, Lisa said. He thinks we're close to something the council species never even considered. Meanwhile, Dr. Nina Brooks at the Mars Research Complex had focused on something the council had dismissed as impossible. Her team had learned to manipulate the basic forces that held matter together. Their first successful test had involved changing iron into gold at the atomic level. The second test had created an entirely new element that didn't exist anywhere else in the known universe. Nina sent me her latest report yesterday, Lisa continued. She says she can now rearrange matter at will. The applications are endless. But science was only part of humanity's transformation. The rejection had also sparked the greatest period of human expansion in history. Governor Sam Phillips on Mars had built the first truly self-sufficient off-world colony. His domed cities now housed 10 million people and produced everything they needed to survive. Administrator Beth Collins had gone even further on Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon. Her underwater cities had developed closed-loop life support systems, so efficient that they actually improved the environment around them. The techniques she pioneered were now being used to terraform Venus and establish outposts in the asteroid belt. Sam called this morning, Jake said. The Mars shipyards just finished their first deep space explorer. He wants to know how far we're allowed to go before we hit the Council's barriers. The barriers were invisible walls of energy that surrounded Earth's solar system. Any human ship that tried to cross them simply stopped working. It was the Council's way of keeping humanity locked up until they decided the species was ready. The barriers won't last forever, Lisa said confidently. Every prison has a key. We just have to find it. While scientists and colonists pushed the boundaries of human achievement, the military had undergone its own revolution. General Patricia Hayes had studied every piece of information they had about Council tactics and technology. Her conclusion was simple. Humans couldn't win by playing the same game as everyone else. Patricia's new training manual arrived yesterday, Jake said, pulling up a holographic display. She calls it adaptive warfare. The basic idea is that humans should never fight the same way twice. The manual was already being used at training centers across the solar system. Instead of learning fixed strategies, human soldiers learned to think on their feet and adapt to any situation. They studied history's greatest battles and learned why the unexpected move often defeated the superior force. Chief Engineer Roy Davis had taken the same approach to technology. Working from his laboratory on Titan, he had built long-range sensors that could monitor Council communications without being detected. The information they gathered painted a picture of a galaxy that had grown comfortable and predictable. Roy's latest intelligence report makes interesting reading, Lisa said. The Council species haven't had a real war in over 300 years. Their technology is advanced, but it's also standardized. Everyone uses the same basic principles, which means they all have the same weaknesses, Jake concluded. The human approach was completely different. Instead of perfecting one type of technology, they developed dozens of different solutions to the same problems. Human ships used 3 different types of faster-than-light drives, depending on the situation. Human weapons could switch between energy beams, projectiles, and exotic matter disruptors at the press of a button. Chief Designer Paul Carter had overseen the construction of the new Earth Defense Fleet. His ships looked nothing like the sleek, elegant vessels favored by Council species. Human ships were built like tools, designed to be modified and upgraded as needed. They were ugly but practical, simple but effective. Paul's proud of the Liberty, Jake said, looking back at the massive ship. He says it's the most flexible vessel ever built. It can serve as a warship, a science vessel, an exploration ship, or a colony transport, depending on what modules we install. The modular design was pure human thinking. Council species built ships for specific purposes and rarely changed them. Humans built ships that could become whatever they needed to be. But perhaps the most important change was in human culture itself. The rejection by the Council had hurt, but it had also united humanity in a way that nothing else could have. The old divisions between nations and peoples seemed petty compared to the challenge of proving themselves worthy of the stars. Writer Marcus Webb had captured this transformation in his popular series of novels about the isolation years. His books showed ordinary people doing extraordinary things, driven by the simple desire to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. Marcus asked me to review his latest manuscript, Lisa said. It's about the first Mars colony and how they survived the reactor failure in year 3. The Council would probably call it primitive emotional storytelling, but it shows something. They don't understand about humans. What's that? We get stronger when things get harder. The observation was more accurate than Lisa realized. Every challenge during the isolation years had pushed humanity to new heights. When the asteroid mining operation at Ceres faced equipment failures, the miners invented new tools that worked better than the originals. When the Europa colony ran out of rare metals, they learned to synthesize what they needed from seawater. Pattern repeated itself across the solar system. Humans didn't just solve problems. They turned problems into opportunities. On the military side, Admiral Jake Harrison had worked with officers like Commander Danny Wright and Captain Carol Fisher to develop new tactics based on human strengths. They couldn't match Council technology, so they focused on speed, adaptability, and surprise. The war games last month were impressive, Jake said. Carol's squadron defeated a simulated Council fleet using nothing but misdirection and timing. What did she do? She made the enemy think she was attacking their strongest point, then hit their weakest one while they were repositioning to defend. Classic human strategy. Make them guess wrong. The success of these tactics was proven in countless simulations. Human commanders consistently defeated computer programs based on Council battle records. But simulations were one thing. Real combat would be another test entirely. As the two old friends stood watching the shipyards, neither of them knew that the test was coming sooner than they thought. Deep in Council space, something was stirring that would change everything. Do you ever wonder what the Council is doing now? Lisa asked. Roy's sensors pick up their communications sometimes, Jake replied. From what we can tell, everything is peaceful. No wars, no major crises, no challenges to speak of. Sounds boring. That's what worries me. Peace is good, but comfort can be dangerous. It makes you soft. Jake's words were more prophetic than he knew. At that very moment, the first reports were reaching Council space about strange energy signatures at the galaxy's edge. Ships were going missing in areas that had been safe for centuries. But the Council was so used to peace that they dismissed these reports as isolated incidents. They had no idea that their greatest challenge was already on its way. Come on, Jake said, turning away from the window. Paul wants to give us a tour of the Liberty before our first test flight. I want to see what 25 years of human engineering looks like from the inside. The first sign that something was wrong came from the edge of Council space, in a region so peaceful that most species had forgotten it existed. The mining colony on Kepler 442b had been sending regular reports for over 200 years. Every week, the same data arrived at the Council archives. Production numbers, weather reports, and routine maintenance schedules. Then, one Tuesday, the report stopped. Administrator Veltar of the Zephyrian Mining Consortium waited 3 days before sending an investigation team. The delay would haunt him for the rest of his life, though he had no way of knowing that at the time. In Council space, problems were rare and usually solved themselves. Equipment failed, communications arrays needed repair, and colonial administrators sometimes forgot to file their reports. The investigation ship that arrived at Kepler 442b found something that defied explanation. The mining colony was gone. Not destroyed, not evacuated, simply gone. The planet showed no signs that anyone had ever lived there. The mining equipment, the residential domes, the landing pads, even the roads connecting different sections of the colony had vanished completely. Captain Morden of the investigation team filed a report that confused everyone who read it. The colony site appears to have been erased, he wrote. There are no blast craters, no debris, no signs of violence. The ground looks as if nothing was ever built there. The Council's response was predictable. A committee was formed to study the disappearance. Experts in colonial management were consulted. Theories were proposed and debated in lengthy sessions that accomplished nothing useful. The official conclusion was that some unknown natural phenomenon had occurred, possibly related to the planet's unique geology. 3 weeks later, the Zephyrian research station at Wolf 359 went silent. This time, the investigation team arrived faster. What they found was even more disturbing than the missing mining colony. The research station hadn't just disappeared. The asteroid it had been built on was gone too. In its place was an area of space that seemed to bend light in strange ways, as if reality itself had been twisted into an impossible shape. Dr. Serenthi of the Nephili Science Council led the investigation this time. Her species existed as intelligent gas clouds, capable of sensing energy patterns that solid beings couldn't detect. What she found at Wolf 359 terrified her in ways she had never experienced. The space where the station existed shows signs of dimensional collapse, she reported to the Emergency Science Committee. Matter and energy in that region appear to have been displaced outside normal spacetime. I cannot explain how this is possible. The committee's response was to form another committee. The council had dealt with problems for over 1,000 years using careful study, detailed analysis, and patient discussion. They saw no reason to change their approach. Now then the Crix trading fleet disappeared. The fleet consisted of 5 large cargo ships and 2 escort vessels, carrying rare metals from the outer colonies to the core worlds. They were following a route that had been used safely for centuries, through space that was monitored by sensors and patrolled by Council security forces. The fleet's last transmission was routine. Captain Zekar reported normal travel conditions and estimated arrival time at their destination. 6 hours later, when the fleet failed to arrive, search teams were dispatched immediately. They found the fleet's cargo containers floating in space, but the ships themselves were gone. The containers showed no signs of damage, but their contents had changed in ways that made no sense. Rare metals had been transformed into substances that didn't exist in any known database. Energy cells designed to power starships for years had been drained completely, but there was no sign of where the energy had gone. Most disturbing of all, the personal belongings of the crew members had been altered in random ways. A Crix warrior's ceremonial sword had been turned into a flower made of the same metal. A child's toy had become a perfect sphere that seemed to contain a miniature star. A family photograph had been changed so that the faces showed beings from species that had never existed. Admiral Kethran of the Nephili Defense Force studied the evidence with growing alarm. Unlike the committees and scientists, he was trained to recognize threats and respond quickly. What he saw convinced him that the Council faced an enemy unlike anything they had encountered before. These are not natural phenomena, he told the Emergency Defense Council. Something is deliberately targeting our facilities and ships. Something with technology far beyond our understanding. The Council's response was to authorize increased patrols and improved sensor arrays. They refused to consider the possibility that their advanced civilization might face a threat they couldn't handle through conventional means. The truth revealed itself at Proxima Station, the Council's most heavily defended military outpost. The station was built inside a hollow asteroid and protected by shields that could withstand the explosion of a small star. Its weapons could destroy entire fleets, and its sensors could detect threats from light years away. Admiral Kethran was at Proxima Station when the attack began. He had stationed his finest ships there, crewed by officers with centuries of experience. If the mysterious enemy could be stopped anywhere, it would be here. The first sign of trouble was a distortion in space near the station's outer sensors. The distortion looked like a crack in reality itself, growing larger with each passing second. Through the crack, Kethran could see something that hurt to look at directly. It wasn't darkness or light, but an absence of everything that should exist. All ships, battle stations, Kethron commanded. Prepare to engage unknown hostiles. The enemy emerged from the crack like oil flowing uphill. It had no fixed shape, no solid form, no characteristics that made sense to beings who lived in normal reality. It simply was, and where it touched normal space ceased to exist. Kethron ordered his fleet to open fire. Energy beams that could melt planets struck the entity and disappeared without effect. Kinetic weapons that could shatter moons passed through it as if it weren't there. Exotic matter bombs that warped space-time itself were absorbed and somehow made the entity larger. "Sir, our weapons have no effect," reported Captain Dortek from the flagship. "Recommend we withdraw and regroup." "Negative," Kethron replied. "We hold the line here. If this thing reaches the core worlds, billions will die." The battle lasted 6 hours and became increasingly desperate. The entity didn't fight back in any conventional sense. It simply continued to exist and expand, consuming everything it touched. Ships, weapons, energy shields, and solid matter. All vanished into the growing void. Kethron tried everything he could think of. He ordered his ships to retreat and bombard the entity from long range. The entity absorbed the bombardment and grew larger. He tried surrounding it with artificial gravity fields strong enough to crush planets. The entity ignored the gravity and continued expanding. In the final hour, Kethron made a desperate decision. He ordered all ships to overload their reactor cores simultaneously, hoping that the combined explosion would destroy whatever this thing was. The explosion lit up half the solar system and should have vaporized everything within 100 million kilometers. When the light faded, the entity was still there, noticeably larger than before. "All ships emergency jump," Kethron ordered. "Get word to the Council. Tell them we've failed." The surviving ships escaped just as Proxima Station vanished into the expanding void. Within minutes, the entire star system was gone, leaving behind a region of space where nothing existed, nothing could exist, and nothing ever would exist again. The news reached Nexus Prime 12 hours later. Counselor Vextar, now an elderly being whose crystal body had grown dim with age, called an emergency session of the full council. Representatives from all 17 species gathered in the Great Chamber, where humanity had been rejected 25 years earlier. "We face a crisis beyond our experience," Vextar announced. "An enemy has appeared that our greatest weapons cannot harm. Our most advanced defenses cannot stop it. Our finest minds cannot understand it." The chamber erupted in discussions as species representatives tried to make sense of what they were hearing. The Crix demanded immediate military action. The Deepelings suggested attempting communication with the entity. The Ethereals proposed fleeing to distant galaxies until the threat passed. Dr. Serenthi floated to the center of the chamber, her gaseous form pulsing with distress. "I have analyzed all available data about these attacks," she reported. "The entity operates outside the physical laws that govern our reality. It doesn't destroy matter and energy so much as it displaces them into dimensions we cannot reach." "Can this displacement be reversed?" asked Counselor Nethara of the Deepelings. "Unknown. Our current understanding of dimensional physics is insufficient to answer that question." The debate continued for hours. Scientists proposed theories that made no sense. Military leaders suggested strategies that had already failed. Philosophers wondered if the entity might be some form of natural cosmic phenomenon that would eventually pass. All their discussions led to the same conclusion. The council had no idea how to fight this enemy. As the session dragged on, younger representatives began suggesting ideas that horrified the established leadership. The council chamber on Nexus Prime had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 17 species argued in dozens of different languages, their voices mixing into a sound like a storm. 3 months had passed since the destruction of Proxima. Station and half of council space had simply ceased to exist. Councillor Vextar stood at the center of the chamber, his crystal body dim with exhaustion. The ancient Zephyrian had led the council through 1,000 years of peace, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. Entire star systems were vanishing every week. Billions of beings had simply stopped existing, erased from reality, by an enemy that couldn't be fought, reasoned with, or understood. Order, Vextar called, his voice echoing through the chamber. We must have order. But order was exactly what the council had lost. The Cricks were demanding immediate evacuation to distant galaxies. The ethereals wanted to try surrendering to. The entities, hoping they might show mercy. The deepelings had proposed hiding in underwater worlds where the creatures might not find them. We are the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, shouted Councillor Morden of the Cricks, his insect-like form clicking with agitation. Our technology has conquered space and time. How can we be defeated by something we cannot even name? Doctor. Serenthi floated near the chamber's center, her gaseous form swirling with distress. As the council's lead scientist, she had spent months studying the entities. Her conclusions offered no comfort. Our traditional understanding of physics is useless here, she reported. These beings operate outside the laws that govern our reality. They don't destroy matter and energy. They displace it into dimensions we cannot reach or understand. Then we must learn to understand those dimensions, declared Councillor Nethara of the Deepelings. Send our greatest minds to study the problem. Our greatest minds are gone, Serenthi replied sadly. The Research Academy on Kepler Prime was consumed last week. The Mathematical Institute at Wolf 1061 vanished 3 days ago. We are losing our best scientists faster than we can train new ones. The truth was worse than most council members realized. The entities seemed to target advanced civilizations specifically. They consumed research stations before mining colonies, universities before farms, and command centers before residential areas. It was as if they were deliberately weakening the Council's ability to fight back. Councillor Vextar had reached a conclusion that horrified him, but he could no longer ignore the evidence. The Council's greatest strength had become its greatest weakness. Their advanced technology, their unified approach to problem-solving, their reliance on established methods, all of it was useless against an enemy that didn't follow any rules they understood. Perhaps, Vextar said quietly, and the chamber fell silent at his tone. We need to consider options we have previously rejected. The silence stretched for long moments. Everyone knew what he meant, but no one wanted to say it aloud. Finally, Councillor Jektar of the young Crix generation spoke the words that changed everything. You mean the species we denied membership? The ones we called too primitive to join galactic civilization? I mean any species that might offer a different perspective, Vextar replied carefully. The entities defeat us because we all think the same way. We all use the same technology, the same strategies, the same approaches to problems. Councillor Mordian's compound eyes flashed with anger. You suggest we crawl to lesser species for help? We who have maintained peace for 1,000 years should beg assistance from primitives. What is the alternative? Vextar asked. In 6 months, there may be no council left to maintain its dignity. The debate that followed was fierce and painful. Some species threatened to leave the council rather than ask for help from beings they considered inferior. Others pointed out that leaving was pointless since the entities would consume them. Whether they were council members or not. Dr. Serenthi finally ended the argument with a simple observation. We have tried everything our combined knowledge can suggest. Every weapon, every defense, every scientific theory has failed. If we continue doing what we have always done, we will all cease to exist. The choice is simple: adapt or die. The vote was close. 9 species voted to seek outside help. 7 voted against. 1 abstained. For the first time in Council history, they would officially ask for assistance from species they had previously rejected. The question now was which species to approach first. The Council's databases contained information on hundreds of civilizations that had been denied membership over the centuries. Most had been judged too primitive, too aggressive, or too unpredictable for Council standards. The humans suggested Counselor Nethara. They were denied membership only 25 years ago. Their technology should still be familiar enough for us to work with. They were also classified as extremely dangerous, Morden protested. Their history shows constant warfare and violence. Good, replied Admiral Thorek, who had replaced the lost Kethron as military commander. Perhaps dangerous is what we need right now. The decision was made. A diplomatic mission would travel to Earth's solar system and ask for human assistance. Counselor Vextar would lead the mission personally, along with Dr. Serenthi and Admiral Thorek. It would be the first time a Council delegation had traveled to a restricted system in over 3 centuries. Preparing for the mission took 2 weeks. The Council's finest remaining ship, the diplomatic vessel Harmony of Worlds, was equipped with the most advanced sensors and communication systems available. The delegation studied everything known about human culture, hoping to understand how to approach a species they had so thoroughly rejected. Meanwhile, 25 light-years away, humanity was well aware of the crisis in Council space. Chief Engineer Roy Davis's long-range sensors had been monitoring the destruction for months. The data his teams collected painted a picture that both fascinated and terrified human scientists. The entities aren't just destroying things randomly, Dr. Alex Turner explained to Admiral Harrison during a briefing aboard the UES Liberty. They're systematically dismantling the infrastructure of advanced civilization. It's like they're erasing the galaxy's ability to resist them. Dr. Lisa Morgan, now gray-haired but still sharp, studied the sensor readings with intense interest. The displacement patterns suggest the consumed matter is being moved into parallel dimensions. If we could find a way to reverse the process ... we might be able to bring back everything that's been lost, Turner finished. But it would require technology the Council doesn't have. Do we have it? Admiral Harrison asked. Not yet, Morgan replied, but Dr. Nina Brooks thinks she's close to a breakthrough. Her work on dimensional physics has advanced far beyond anything the Council has achieved. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Humanity's forced isolation had pushed them to develop exactly the kind of unconventional science needed to fight the entities. While the Council had perfected their existing knowledge, humans had been forced to think outside the boundaries of established science. President Karen Walsh, now serving her 3rd term, had been following the crisis closely. When Admiral Harrison briefed her on the approaching Council delegation, her response was immediate and clear. We help them, she said simply. Not because we owe them anything, but because if those entities reach Earth, our isolation won't protect us. They rejected us, Harrison reminded her. Called us too dangerous and primitive. Maybe so, Walsh replied, but we're not them. We don't abandon people just because they've been cruel to us. When the Harmony of Worlds arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system, its crew was amazed by what they found. The sensor readings showed a level of technological activity that rivaled the core worlds of Council space. Massive orbital installations surrounded Earth and its colonies. Ships moved between the planets in numbers that suggested a thriving industrial civilization. This is impossible, Admiral Thorek said, studying the displays. 25 years ago, they barely had faster-than-light travel. Now they show signs of technology we don't recognize. Counselor Vextar felt a chill run through his crystal. Form. Had the Council made a terrible mistake? Had they dismissed a species that was actually more advanced than they realized? The human response to their arrival was swift and professional. Within hours, they received a transmission from Admiral Harrison aboard the UES Liberty. The massive human ship that approached them was larger than anything in the Council fleet and built with a design philosophy that emphasized function over beauty. Counselor Vextar, Harrison said when communications were established. It's been a long time. Admiral Harrison, Vextar replied, recognizing the human captain who had once stood in the council chamber. I come to you under circumstances I never expected. I'm aware of the situation in council space, Harrison said. Our sensors have been monitoring the destruction. You've lost half your territory in 3 months. The directness of the statement was typically human, Vextar realized. No diplomatic pleasantries, no careful circling around difficult topics. Just the truth, stated plainly. We have come to request your assistance, Vextar said, the words painful to speak. The Council faces an enemy we cannot defeat with conventional means. You want our help, Harrison said. It wasn't a question. Yes. The negotiations aboard the UES Liberty lasted 3 days and changed the course of galactic history. Admiral Harrison, President Walsh, and Dr. Morgan sat across from Counselor Vextar, Dr. Serenthi, and Admiral Thoric in the ship's main conference room. The walls displayed holographic images of the destruction spreading across council space, a constant reminder of what was at stake. You want our help fighting these entities, President Walsh said, her voice calm but firm. But first, we need to establish the terms. Counselor Vextar's crystal form flickered with what humans had learned to recognize as embarrassment. 25 years ago, he had stood in the council chamber and declared humanity unworthy of galactic civilization. Now he was begging for their help. What terms do you propose? He asked. Full partnership, Admiral Harrison replied. If humanity fights this war, we lead it. No more restrictions on our movement, no more barriers around our space, and no more treating us like children who need supervision. Admiral Thoric S. Feathers ruffled with indignation. You ask us to surrender command of our own military forces to a species with no experience in galactic warfare. Your experience got half the galaxy consumed, Dr. Morgan pointed out gently, but firmly. Maybe it's time to try inexperience. Dr. Serenthi floated forward, her gaseous form pulsing with urgency. The entities continue to advance while we debate. Every hour of delay costs thousands of lives. Which is exactly why we need to get this right, President Walsh said. If we're going to save your people, we need the authority to do it our way. The debate continued for hours. The council delegation struggled with the idea of surrendering control to beings they had considered primitive. The human delegation refused to commit their people to a war where they would be treated as junior partners. Finally, Dr. Morgan presented the breakthrough that changed everything. She activated a holographic display showing her team's analysis of the entity attacks. We've been studying the destruction patterns for months, she explained. The entities aren't actually destroying matter and energy. They're displacing it into parallel dimensions. That means everything they've consumed still exists somewhere. Counselor Vextar leaned forward, his crystal body brightening with hope. Are you saying the lost worlds can be recovered? We think so, Morgan replied. But it will require technology that doesn't exist yet. Technology that combines human dimensional physics with council energy manipulation techniques. The implications were clear. Neither humanity nor the council could solve this problem alone. They needed each other not just to survive, but to reverse the damage already done. Full partnership, Vextar said finally. Humanity leads the military effort, with council forces providing support. In exchange, all barriers between our territories are permanently removed. and Earth receives immediate membership in an expanded galactic government. President Walsh nodded. Agreed. Admiral Harrison will command all military operations. Dr. Morgan will lead the scientific effort to reverse the entity displacements. And we do this as equals, not as saviors and victims. The formal agreements were signed within hours. For the first time in galactic history, a species rejected by the Council was given command of its military forces. The news sent shockwaves through both civilizations, but there was no time for lengthy debates. The entities were advancing toward the galactic core, and every day of delay meant more lost worlds. Admiral Harrison wasted no time implementing his strategy. Operation Reclaim would combine the largest fleet in galactic history with tactics a Council had never seen before. Human ships would form the spearhead, using their adaptive technology and unpredictable methods to create openings for Council vessels to deploy new weapons. Based on Dr. Morgan's theories, the fleet that assembled at Staging Point Alpha was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 200 ships from 12 different species, ranging from massive human battleships to elegant ethereal science vessels. Each ship had been modified with new technology that combined human adaptability with alien expertise. Captain Steve Murphy commanded the UES Defiance, one of the new fast attack ships designed specifically for fighting the entities. His crew included humans, Krix engineers, and Nephili navigators working together in ways that would have been impossible under the old Council structure. All ships, this is Admiral Harrison, came the voice over the fleet communications. We're about to face an enemy that has defeated every conventional strategy tried against it. Today, we try something different. Today, we fight like humans. The first target was the entity manifestation near the Vega system, where a massive tier in reality had been growing for weeks. As the fleet approached, sensors detected energy patterns that made no sense according to established physics. Remember, Dr. Morgan's voice came over the science channels. These beings operate outside normal space-time. Don't try to fight them with conventional weapons. Use the reality anchors to lock local space into stable configurations. The battle began unlike any engagement in recorded history. Instead of forming orderly lines and exchanging fire at maximum range, the human ships scattered in seemingly random patterns. They darted in and out of weapons range, never staying in one place long enough for the entities to focus on them. Captain Murphy led his squadron in a maneuver that would have horrified traditional military commanders. The Defiance dove straight toward the reality tier, deployed its experimental reality anchor, and then spun away at impossible angles while the device activated. The anchor worked. For the first time since the crisis began, an entity manifestation was stopped in its tracks. The tier in space stabilized, then began to shrink as the displacement effect reversed itself. It's working, reported Dr. Nina Brooks from her position aboard the science ship UES Discovery. The reality anchor is forcing local space-time back into normal configuration. The displaced matter is beginning to return. Across the battle zone, human ships deployed more anchors while Council vessels provided covering fire. The entities tried to adapt, sending tendrils of unreality toward the human ships. But the crews had trained for exactly this situation. They used speed misdirection and pure unpredictability to stay ahead of attacks that moved faster than light itself. The breakthrough came when Dr. Brooks realized how to reverse the displacement effect completely. Working with ethereal physicists and Krix engineers, she modified the reality anchors to create restoration fields that could bring back entire star systems. All ships, prepare for restoration sequence, she announced. This is going to get interesting. The Master Restoration Array activated with a flash of light that could be seen across half the galaxy. Reality twisted, bent, and suddenly snapped back into its proper configuration. The Vega system, which had been consumed weeks earlier, reappeared, exactly as it had been before the attack. But the victory came with a price. The restoration process created massive space-time distortions that threatened to tear apart the fabric of reality itself. The human ships, with their adaptive technology, managed to ride the waves of distorted space. Many council vessels, designed for stable conditions, were damaged or destroyed. Captain Lisa Chun of the UES Redemption made the ultimate sacrifice when her ship's reality anchor overloaded. She stayed at her post to manually stabilize the device, saving the entire fleet but dying in the process. Her final transmission was simple: worth it. Get them all back. The restoration waves spread across the galaxy like ripples in a pond. One by one, consumed star systems began to reappear. The mining colony on Kepler 442b materialized exactly as it had been before the first attack. The research station at Wolf 359 resumed sending data as if nothing had happened. Even Proxima Station and Admiral Kethron's fleet returned, their crews unaware that they had been displaced from reality for months. Dr. Morgan's theory proved correct in ways that amazed even her. The entities hadn't destroyed anything. They had simply moved it all to parallel dimensions where it continued to exist unchanged. The restoration process brought it all back, along with valuable data about the nature of parallel reality. The final battle took place at the entity's primary manifestation point near the galactic core. Admiral Harrison led the combined fleet in an assault that used every lesson learned from previous engagements. Human ships created chaos and confusion, while council vessels deployed massive restoration arrays. The entities fought back with distortions that defied description, but humanity's unpredictable tactics kept them off balance long enough for the science teams to complete their work. When the last entity manifestation was reversed, the galaxy fell silent. For the first time in months, no new reports of disappearances came in. The threat that had seemed unstoppable was gone, defeated not by superior firepower, but by the willingness to think differently. 6 months later, the new Galactic Alliance held its first session in a rebuilt chamber on Nexus Prime. The old Council of 17 had become the Alliance of 23, with humanity and 5 other previously rejected species taking their places as full members. Admiral Harrison, now Fleet Admiral of the United Galactic Defense Force, stood where Counselor Vextar had once delivered humanity's rejection. But instead of speaking about unworthiness, he talked about the future they would build together.